Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you are looking to support me, that is my Patreon. Today, we are doing chapter 75 of Breaking Step. The door proved to be a challenge. The lock was like those on the houses, but with more tumblers, and had a weave through them. Okay, with more tumbler, with a weave, with more tumblers with a weave through them, forcing him to manipulate that along with physically moving them. Because he used his ice and the weave reacted to that element, it was easier than it would be for another rogue, unless they too had worked out how to use their essence to manipulate the tumblers. They would have to pick them normally while also getting the weave to move. He expected it would be delicate, frustrating work. Unless they went the opposite direction, Delicate could often be beaten through brute force. Nothing he sensed of the weave led him to think Ganny had considered that when she made the lock, so at least one rogue would be able to simply blast their way through. The elemental tumbler moved into place and the door unlocked. The corridor was larger than those in the guild. There, 3 people could comfortably walk side by side. Here, his whole team could manage it. It went left and right, with doors facing each other. On the right side, it ended after a set of 2 doors, while on the left, after 5 set, the hall turned left. Which room is it? Jekyll asked. Tibs sensed, but the walls of the rooms were woven in such a way he could only get a vague impression of what was inside. A few golem people in each. It is my experience, Kamdar said, that people in authority reside higher within their organization. Should we still check the rooms? The fighter said. Just in case? Just in case there's loot, you mean. In case the dungeon is tricking us. Jekyll countered, sounding too innocent. He's the leader, Jekyll said to the look the others gave him. But this is about loot, Mez said. We can't trust his judgment. Tib sighed and went to the window at the end of the hall. He'd been right. He could see through, but he couldn't tell where the orb was, and he wasn't getting close enough he'd risk touching the glass. How much of all day did they have left? I think we should go for the boss, he said, facing his team. Getting Dawn out of the trap is more important. On the next run we can. A door opened between them, and a woman carrying papers stepped out. She paused, looking left and right as if she was taking them in. Then, with a sudden silent scream, she ran at his team, papers fading into essence as they flew out of her hand. Jekyll's skin turned stone gray as he stepped forward and punched her. She flew back to Tibbs's side and stopped against the wall, where she crumbled away, leaving a silver coin and a piece of paper behind. This is going to be easy, the fighter said, sounding disappointed. This is a dungeon, Commodore said as Tibbs bent to pick up the loot. I would be wary of making assumptions. The coin was a coin, the sun on a side, Claria and Taurus on the other. He'd seen coins stamped like this in loot and people's pockets before. The paper was, he turned it over, blank. A prop in the play that is the theme of this building? Commodore asked. Those she was holding disappeared, Miss said. This dropped after she was dead. Tibbs corrected. But you're right, the dungeon doesn't have things dropping that don't matter. Jekyll took the paper. It leaves loot. He looked at it this way and that. Maybe this is a note of promise? What? Mez asked while Tibbs stared at his friend. It's a paper that says you get coins when you give it to the right person. Tibbs answered. I didn't know you knew about those. Jekyll shrugged. My dad dealt with those. Shouldn't there be something written on it then? Mez said, taking it from Jekyll. It could be some sort of magical paper, Jekyll said, with how many coins we get appearing once we leave. I don't know. Mez handed it back with a shrug. There's no essence in it, Tibbs said. I mean, no more than what makes it. It's just dungeon-made paper. You sure? Jekyll turned it over again. Why would it bother with that? It's not like the meat and herbs of the first two floors. No one needs paper. Tibbs shrugged. It was the only answer he could give until he was able to ask Ganny or Stowe about it. People need paper, Mess said. It would be extra money from the run since the guild isn't going to care about ordinary paper. Jekyll put the paper in his pouch. We'll see how many coins Darren will give us for it. How do we make it to the next floor, since Kamdar says it's where we'll find the boss? Tibbs sensed ahead. He couldn't make out anything behind the doors that felt like stairs, but there was one, nearly to the other side of the building, that had no door. Around the turn, I think, then, at the end of that corridor. They reached the turn, and when a door behind them opened behind them. Before they reacted, golem person, a golem person was on them. Krumdar struck it while Jackal stepped to the front and Mez stepped back, arrow in his bow. The golem barely reacted to the blows. Something, Tibbs yelled as he sensed the air essence gather at the golem's hand. Then it shoved it forward before Tibbs could disrupt it, and they all flew back. He etched a water wall behind them with filigree of caw, and instead of hitting stone, they were caught in sticky water that slowly lowered them to the ground. Tibbs dropped as he absorbed the essence holding him, and Tibbs dropped as he absorbed the essence holding him. He ran as soon as his foot hit the floor, forming a jagged ice and metal sword and shield. He etched air over his shield lines, moving away filigree of dew in a spiral through it. And when he caught the next blast of air, the etching ripped it apart, and yet still slowed Tibbs. The sword bit deep into the golem, then was wrenched out of his hand as it jumped back. He made another as fire arrows flew over his head, only to be flung aside by the torrent of air that followed the golem's wave of a hand. Darkness hit it, and it staggered. Jacker was on it, but his strikes blocked and diverted by air. The golem struck him, and Tibbs dropped as Jackal flew over him and sent a sheet of water over the floor. The water rose over the golem's boot as he deflected arrows and Kumdar's blast. Tibbs turned the water to ice as he got to a knee, then exploded it. The golem didn't react to how painful losing both legs would be to anyone else, but the air essence it used as his defense shattered as it focused on trying to remain standing. It shattered under the volley of arrow that hit it in the chest before it reached the ground. Everyone okay? Tibbs called. I'm good. Jekyll got to his feet and stepped away from the floor to ceiling crack the impact had left in the wall. Thanks for the save, Mess said, walking by Tibbs. How difficult this proved to be meet the requirement to fill your thirst for battle? Kamdar asked. Wish I'd gotten to do more, Jekyll grinned. But yeah. Another blank page, as handed it to the silver to coin to Tibbs. Maybe we can fight enough of the golems? Darren will give us gold for the paper, Jekyll said. You are simply reaching for an excuse to fight more of these golems, Commodore said. No, I'm looking for a way to get more coins, the fighter replied. Then make sure to have Tibbs ask the merchant, Mez said, starting down the hall. He always gives him more than what is handed in. More for what is handed in. They proceeded cautiously, but made it to the empty doorway without doors opening, only to find an empty room. Tibbs sighed as the others looked at him. It's a decoy. He should have thought of that. Ganny knew how he could sense. Had probably realized that the haze she'd created on the third floor wasn't all that effective here. Anymore. Or maybe the city was too vast for her to be able to make it as consecrated. He'd ask if he could. Maybe they're outside? Jekyll offered. Is that a thing where you're from? Mez asked. I saw something like that in Mountain Sea. They went up to a terrace and continued to another floor of the building. Doesn't that feel too simple? It's a room, Tibs said with another sigh. He focused on the one facing the decoy, but whatever Ganny had used to create the fog on the previous floor, she'd concentrated here. No matter how narrow he made his sense, he hardly got anything from it. All I can tell is that there are two golem people in the room. If there's anything else, it's masked somehow. Isn't it strange that the dungeon can hide something like stairs from Tibs, but not the golem? A golem's complexity is in the essence that compose them may make them harder to camouflage. Condor said, stairs are nothing more than the same as the wall arranged in a different shape. I expect it would take little to have one bleed into the other. Or it want us to know how much fun we can expect to have, Jekyll said, stepping to the door. We hit them hard, and if there are no stairs, we get the loot and go to the next one. I wish you weren't so eager to get into more fights. Mez pulled the string of his bow and an arrow formed. What can I say? I love myself a good time. He kicked the door in. So, the archer said, standing over Jekyll as Tib applied a weave of purity over the break in the stone arm. How much of a good time was it this time? The first two rooms had been simple. Jekyll rushed in, Tibs on his heel, then moved out of the doorway so Mez and Kumdar could get in attacks while they closed the distance. In the first room, the two golem hadn't had time to stand before the arrows and dark blasts shattered them, leaving a paper and silver each to fall on the desk as they on the desk they had sat behind. On the second, the desk had been on each side of the room instead of before the door. So Jekyll and Tibs did the dispatching. Again, one strike from each and the golem parson died as if they were less than normal people. The third room had a lone occupant behind a more impressive desk. He used crystal essence to fracture the fire arrow and dark blast, redirecting some of them at Tibs and Jekyll. The darkness that hit Tibs did nothing, but the fire hurt even as he wrenched control away and absorbed it. Jekyll had trouble keeping standing from the darkness draining him, but he forced himself to the golem and one punch shattered it. A potion of yellow liquid while Tibs opened the trapped cache masquerading as a cabinet, and his energy was back. It was the fourth room that caused them trouble, as those in it exited just as they stepped up to it. Jekyll took the brunt of all the attacks, which left him on the ground with only his will and earth essence keeping him together, while Tibs, Mez, and Kumdar struggled to take down the coordinated attacks. I've had a worse day, Jekyll said through gritted teeth. Back in the pits. He's fine, Tibs commented darkly. He was now. Jekyll had a wrap of Tibs's element, holding everything in place, while purity did its work. He wanted to blame Jekyll for this, but it was all of them who had been careless. They'd been too sure of what they'd encounter. They'd been ready for hard fights, but not attackers on their level. If it had been anyone other than Jekyll in front, Tibs didn't know if they would have survived. I'll be fine, Jekyll said, sounding better. I'm not dying, Tibs. You could have. We'll be more careful. Not having Dawn costing us. Not having Dawn is costing us, Mez said, and Jekyll nodded. Then I am pleased to inform you the search is over, Kumdar said from inside the room. Although I believe having found the stairs will not be as helpful reaching the other floor as you may expect. This focused on making sure Jekyll was healing properly, to keep from rushing in and seeing what Kumdar meant. He breathed, acknowledged his curiosity, then concentrated on the more important task. Once Jekyll was able to move, they entered the room. Unlike the others, with their desk and one cabinet, this one had stairs to the next floor and a table beside them with two trays, one of which was piled high with papers. Tib joined Mez and Kumdar before the stairs and found out why they weren't going up. An unseen wall kept him from setting foot on them. And that concludes Chapter 75 of Breaking Step. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the story, it is up on Royal Road along with the other books. If you want to read ahead of Royal Road and support me in the process, that is on my Patreon, where we are about 20 chapters ahead. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.